For a long time, Tess did not join in the weekly pilgrimages, but under pressure from matrons not much older than herself, for marriage before means was the rule here as elsewhere, Tess at length consented to go. Her first experience of the journey afforded her more enjoyment than she had expected, the hilariousness of the others being quite contagious after her monotonous attention to the poultry farm all the week. She went again and again, being graceful and interesting, standing moreover on the momentary threshold of womanhood. Her appearance drew down upon her some sly regards from loungers in the streets of Chaseborough. Hence, though sometimes her journey to the town was made independently, she always searched for her fellows at nightfall to have the protection of their companionship homeward. This had gone on for a month or two, when a Saturday came in early September, on which a fair and market coincided, and the pilgrims from Tantridge sought double delights at the inns on that account. It was past sunset, and Tess waited for the troop till she was quite weary. While she stood at a corner by the tavern in which they sat, she heard a footstep, and, looking round, saw the red coal of a cigar. D'Urberville was standing there also. He beckoned to her, and she reluctantly went to him. "My pretty, what are you doing here at this time of night?" She was so tired after her long day and her walk that she confided her trouble to him. "I have been waiting ever so long, sir, to have their company home, because the road is rather strange to me at night. But I really think I will wait no longer." "Do not. I have only a saddle horse here today, but come to the Flower de Luz, and I'll hire a trap and drive you home with me." Tess had never quite got over her original mistrust of him, and, with all their tardiness, she preferred to walk home with the workfolk. So she answered that she was much obliged to him, but, on second thoughts, would not trouble him. "I have said that I will wait for him, and they will expect me to now." "Very well, silly. Please yourself." As soon as he had relit a cigar and walked away, the Tantridge villager within began also to recollect how time was flying, and prepared to leave in a body. Their bundles and baskets were gathered up, and half an hour later, when the clock chime sounded 11:15, they were straggling along the lane which led up the hill towards their homes. It was a 3-mile walk along a dry, white road, made whiter tonight by the light of the moon. Tess soon perceived, as she walked in the flock, sometimes with this one, sometimes with that the fresh night air was producing staggerings and serpentine courses among the men who had partaken too freely. Some of the more careless women also were wandering in their gait, to wit, a dark virago, Car Darch, dubbed Queen of Spades, till lately a favourite of D'Urberville's, Nancy, her sister, nicknamed the Queen of Diamonds, and a young married woman who had already tumbled down. Yet, however terrestrial and lumpy their appearance just now to the mean, unglamoured eye, to themselves the case was different. They followed the road with the knowledge that they were soaring along in a supporting medium, possessed of original and profound thoughts, themselves and surrounding nature forming an organism of which all the parts harmoniously and joyously interpenetrated each other. They were as sublime as the moon and stars above them, and the moon and stars were as ardent as they. Tess, however, had undergone such painful experiences in this kind in her father's house that the discovery of their condition spoiled the pleasure she was beginning to feel in the moonlight journey. Yet she stuck to the party for reasons above given. In the open highway, they had progressed in scattered order, but now their route was through a field gate, and the foremost, finding a difficulty in opening it, they closed up together. The leading pedestrian was Carr, the Queen of Spades, who carried a wicker basket containing her mother's groceries, her own draperies, and other purchases for the week. The basket being large and heavy, Carr had placed it, for convenience, a portridge on the top of her head, where it rode on in jeopardized balance as she walked with arms akimbo. "Well, whatever is that a-creeping down thy back, Carr Darge?" said one of the group suddenly. All looked at Carr. Her gown was a light cotton print, and from the back of her head a kind of rope could be seen descending to some distance below her waist, like a chimanin's queue. "'Tis her hair falling down," said another. No, it was not her hair. It was a black stream of something oozing from her basket, and it glistened like a slimy snake in the cold, still rays of the moon. "'Tis treacle," said an observant matron. Treacle it was. Carr's poor old grandmother had a weakness for the sweet stuff. Honey she had in plenty, out of her own hives, but treacle was what her soul desired, and Carr had been about to give her a treat of surprise. Hastily lowering the basket, the dark girl found that the vessel containing the liquid had been smashed within. By this time there had arisen a shout of laughter at the extraordinary appearance of Carr's back, which irritated the Dark Queen into getting rid of the disfigurement by the first sudden means available, and independently of the help of the scoffers. She rushed excitedly into the field they were about to cross, and, flinging herself flat on her back upon the grass, began to wipe her gown as well as she could by gyrating horizontally on the herbage and dragging herself over it upon her elbows. The laughter rang louder. They clung to the gate, to the posts, rested on their staves in the weakness engendered by their convulsions at the spectacle of Carr. Our heroine, who had hitherto held her peace at this wild moment, could not help joining in with the rest. It was a misfortune in more ways than one. No sooner did the Dark Queen hear the soberer, richer note of Tess among those of the other workpeople than a long, smouldering sense of rivalry inflamed her to madness. She sprang to her feet and closely faced the object of her dislike. "How darest thou laugh at me, hussy?" she cried. "I couldn't really help it when the others did," apologized Tess, still tittering. "Ah, this to think the beast everybody tossed in because the beast first favourite with he just now. But stop a bit, my lady, stop a bit. I am as good as two of such. Look here, here is at E." To Tess's horror, the Dark Queen began stripping off the bodice of her gown, which, for the added reason of its ridiculed condition, she was only too glad to be free of, till she had bared her plump neck, shoulders, and arms to the moonshine, under which they looked as luminous and beautiful as some Parixtilian creation in a possession of the faultless rotundities of a lusty country girl. She closed her fists and squared up at Tess. "Indeed, then, I shall not fight," said the latter majestically, "and if I had known you was of that sort, I wouldn't have let myself down as to come with such a whorage as this is." The rather too inclusive speech brought down a torrent of vituperation from other quarters upon fair Tess's unlucky head, particularly from the Queen of Diamonds, who, result of that attempt was directly to increase the war. Tess was indignant and ashamed. She no longer minded the loneliness of the way and the lateness of the hour. Her one object was to get away from the whole crew as soon as possible. She knew well enough that the better among them would repent of their passion next day. They were all now inside the field, and she was edging about to rush off alone when a horseman emerged, almost silently from the corner of the hedge, and screened the road. And Alec d'Urberville looked round upon them. "What the devil is all this row about, work folk?" he asked. The explanation was not readily forthcoming, and in truth, he did not require any. Having heard their voices, while yet some way off, he had ridden creepingly forward, and learned enough to satisfy himself. Tess was standing apart from the rest, near the gate. He bent over towards her. "Jump up behind me," he whispered, "and we'll get shot of the screaming cats in a jiffy." She felt almost ready to faint, so vivid was her sense of the crisis. At almost any other moment of her life, she would have refused such proffered aid and company, as she had refused them several times before. And now the loneliness would not of itself have forced her to do otherwise. But, coming as the invitation did, at the particular juncture when fear and indignation at these adversaries could be transformed by a spring of the foot into a triumph over them, she abandoned herself to her impulse, put her toe upon his instep, and leapt into the saddle behind him. The pair were speeding away into the distant grey by the time that the conscientious revellers became aware of what had happened. The Queen of Spades forgot the stain on her bodice, and stood beside the Queen of Diamonds and the new-married, staggering young woman, all with a gaze of fixity in the direction in which the horse's tramp was diminishing into silence on the road. "What'd you be looking at?" asked a man who had not observed the incident. "Ho, ho, ho," laughed Darkcar. "He, he, he," laughed the tippling bride, as she steadied herself on the arm of her fond husband. "Hoo, hoo, hoo," laughed Darkcar's mother, stroking her moustache as she explained laconically. "Out of the frying pan into the fire." And then these children of the open air, whom even excess of alcohol could scarce injure permanently, betook themselves to the field path, and, as they went there, moved onward with them. Around the shadow of each one's head, an opalized circle of glory, formed by the moon's rays upon the glistening sheet of dew. Each pedestrian could see no halo but his or her own, which never deserted the head shadow, whatever its vulgar unsteadiness might be, but adhered to it, and persistently beautified it, till the erratic motions seemed an inherent part of the irritation, and the fumes of their breathing a component of the night's mist, and the spirit of the scene, and of the moonlight, and of nature seemed harmoniously to mingle with the spirit of wine. Chapter 11. The twain cantered along for some time without speech, Tess, as she clung to him, still panting in her triumph, yet, in other respects, dubious. She had perceived that the horse was not the spirited one he sometimes rode, and felt no alarm on that score, though her seat was precarious enough. She asked him to slow the animal to a walk, which Alec accordingly did. "Neatly done, was it not, dear Tess?" he said, by and by. "Yes," she said. "I am sure I ought to be much obliged to you." "And are you?" She did not reply. "Tess, why do you always dislike my kissing you?" "I suppose because I don't love you." You are quite sure? I am angry with you sometimes. Ah, I have feared as much. Nevertheless, Alec did not object to that confession. He knew that anything was better than frigidity. Why haven't you told me when I have made you angry? You know very well why, because I cannot help myself here. I haven't offended you often by love-making. You have sometimes. How many times? You know as well as I, too many times. Every time I have tried. She was silent, and the horse ambled along for a considerable distance, till a faint, luminous fog, which had hung in the hollows all the evening, became general and enveloped them. It seemed to hold the moonlight in suspension, rendering it more pervasive than in clear air. Whether on this account, or from absent-mindedness, or from sleepiness, she did not perceive that they had long ago passed the point at which the lane to Tantridge branched from the highway, and that her conductor had not taken the Tantridge track. She was inexpressibly weary. She had risen at 5 o'clock every morning of that week, had been on foot the whole of each day, and, on this evening, had, in addition, walked the 3 miles to Chaseborough, waited 3 hours for her neighbours without eating or drinking, her impatience to start them preventing her either. She had then walked a mile of the way home, and had undergone the excitement of the quarrel, till it was now nearly 1 o'clock. Only once, however, was she overcome by actual drowsiness. In that moment of oblivion, she sank gently against him. D'Urberville withdrew his feet from the stirrups, turned sideways on the saddle, and enclosed her waist with his arm to support her. This immediately put her on the defensive, and, with one of those sudden impulses of reprisal to which she was liable, she gave him a little push from her. In his ticklish position, he nearly lost his balance, and only just avoided rolling over into the road. The horse, though a powerful one, being fortunately the quietest he rode. "That is devilishly unkind," he said. "I mean no harm, only to keep you from falling." She pondered suspiciously, till, thinking that this might, after all, be true, she relented, and said quite humbly, "I beg your pardon, sir." "I won't pardon you, unless you show some confidence in me. Good God," he burst out, "what am I, to be repulsed so by a mere chit like you? For near 3 mortal months have you trifled with my feelings, eluded me, and snubbed me, and I won't stand it. I'll leave you tomorrow, sir." "No, you will not leave me tomorrow. Will you, I ask once more, show your belief in me by letting me encircle you with my arm? Come between us two and nobody else now. We know each other well, and you know that I love you, and think you are the prettiest girl in the world, which you are. May I treat you as a lover?" She drew a quick, pettish breath of objection, writhing uneasily on her seat, looking far ahead, and murmured, "I don't know. I wish. How can I say yes or no when?" He settled the matter by clasping his arm around her, as he desired, and Tess expressed no further negative. Thus they sidled onward till it struck her they had been It is a lovely night, and why should we not prolong our ride a little? How could you be so treacherous, said Tess, between archness and real dismay, and getting rid of his arm by pulling open his fingers one by one, though at the risk of slipping off herself. Just when I've been putting such trust in you and obliging you to please you, because I thought I had wronged you by that push. Please, set me down and let me walk home. You cannot walk home, even if the air were clear. We are miles away from Tantridge, if I must tell you, and in this growing fog, you might wander for hours among the trees. Never mind that, she coaxed. Put me down, I beg you. I don't mind where it is, only let me get down, sir, please. Very well then, I will, on one condition. Having brought you here to this out-of-the-way place, I feel myself responsible for your safe conduct home, whatever you may yourself feel about it. As to your getting to Tantridge without assistance, it is quite impossible, for, to tell the truth, owing to this fog, which so disguises everything, I don't quite know where we are myself. Now, if you will promise to wait beside the horse while I walk through the bushes till I come to some road or house and ascertain exactly our whereabouts, I'll deposit you here willingly. When I come back, I'll give you full directions, and if you insist upon walking, you may, or you may ride, at your pleasure. She accepted these terms and slid off on the near side, though not till he had stolen a hearty kiss. He sprang down on the other side. I suppose I must hold the horse, said she. Oh, no, it's not necessary, replied Ag, patting the panting creature. He's had enough of it for tonight. He turned the horse's head into the bushes, hitched him on to a bough, and, pulling off a light dust coat that he wore, spread it upon the thick leaves. Now, you sit here, he said. That will keep away the damp. Just give an eye to the horse. It will be quite sufficient. He took a few steps away from her, but, returning, said, By the by, Tess, your father has a new cob today. Somebody gave it to him. Somebody. You. D'Urberville nodded. Oh, how very good of you that is, she exclaimed, with a painful sense of the awkwardness of having to thank him just then. And the children have some toys. I didn't know you ever sent them anything, she murmured, much moved. I almost wish you had not. Yes, I almost wish it. Why, dear, it hampers me so. Tessie, don't you love me ever so little now? I'm grateful, she reluctantly admitted, but I fear I do not. The sudden vision of his passion for herself as a factor in this result so distressed her that, beginning with one slow tear and then following with another, she wept outright. Don't cry, dear one. Now sit down here and wait till I come. She passively sat down on the coat that he had spread and shivered slightly. Are you cold? He asked. Not very. A little. He touched her with his fingers, which sank into her as into a pillow. You have only that puffy muslin dress on. How's that? It's my best summer one. It was very warm when I started, and I didn't know I was going to ride, and that it would be night. Nights grow chilly in September. Let me see. He went to the horse, took a druggist bottle from a parcel in the saddle, and, after some trouble in opening it, held it to her mouth unawares. Tess sputtered and coughed, and gasping, It will go on my pretty frock, swallowed, as he poured, to prevent the catastrophe she feared. That's it. Now you'll feel warmer, said D'Urberville. It is only a well-known cordial that my mother ordered me to bring for household purposes, and she won't mind me using some of it medicinally. Now, my pretty, rest there. I shall soon be back again." He pulled the overcoat round her shoulders and plunged into the webs of vapour, which, by this time, formed veils between the trees. She could hear the rustling of the branches as he ascended the adjoining slope, till his movements were no louder than the hopping of a bird, and finally died away. With the setting of the moon, the pale light lessened, and Tess became invisible, as she fell into reverie upon the leaves where he had left her. In the meantime, Alec d'Urberville had pushed on up the slope to clear his genuine doubt as to the quarter of the chase they were in. He had, in fact, ridden quite at random for over an hour, taking any turning that came at hand in order to prolong companionship with her, and giving far more attention to Tess's moonlit person than to any wayside object. A little rest for the jaded animal being desirable, he did not hasten his search for landmarks. A clamber over the hill into the adjoining vale brought him to the fence of a highway whose aspect he recognized, which settled the question of their whereabouts. D'Urberville thereupon turned back, but by this time the moon had quite gone down, and, partly on account of the fog, the chase was wrapped in thick darkness, although morning was not far off. He was obliged to advance with outstretched hands to avoid contact with the bows, and discovered that to hit the exact spot from which he had started was at first entirely beyond him. Roaming up and down, round and round, he at length heard a slight movement of the horse close at hand, and the sleeve of his overcoat unexpectedly caught his foot. "Tess," said d'Urberville. There was no answer. The obscurity was now so great that he could see absolutely nothing but a pale nebulousness at his feet, which represented the white muslin figure he had left upon the dead leaves. Everything else was blackness alike. D'Urberville stooped and heard a gentle, regular breathing. She was sleeping soundly. Darkness and silence rolled everywhere around. Above them rose the primeval yews and oaks of the chase, in which were poised gentle, roosting birds in their last nap, and around them the hopping rabbits and hares. But where was Tess's guardian angel? Where was Providence? Perhaps, like that other god of whom the ironical Tishbite spoke, he was talking, or he was pursuing, or he was in a journey, or, peradventure, he was sleeping, and was not to be awaked. Already, at that hour, some sons of the forest were stirring, and striking lights, in not very distant cottages, good and sincere hearts among them, patterns of honesty and devotion and chivalry, and powerful horses were stamping in their stalls, ready to be let out into the morning air. But no dart or thread of intelligence inspired these men to harness and mount, or gave them by any means the least inkling that their sister was in the hands of the spoiler, and they did not come that way. Why it was that upon this beautiful feminine tissue, sensitive as gossamer and practically blank as snow as yet, there should have been traced such a coarse pattern as it was doomed to receive. Why so often the coarse appropriates the finer thus many thousand years of analytical philosophy have failed to explain to our sense of order. One may, indeed, admit the possibility of a retribution lurking in the catastrophes. Doubtless some of Tess d'Urberville's mailed ancestors known people did down in those retreats are never tired of saying among each other in their fatalistic way, "It was to be." There lay the pity of it. An immeasurable chasm was to divide our heroine's personality thereafter from that previous self of hers, who stepped from her mother's door to try her fortune at Tantridge Poultry Farm.